In August 1914, Ernest Shackleton walked down the docks in London wearing a heavy coat and carrying the confidence of a man who believed the impossible could bend to willpower. Around him were 27 crew members, engineers, sailors, scientists, dreamers from across the world, each recruited by Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition for one mission: to cross Antarctica on foot. This was not a casual sail into polar waters. This was a symbolic march against nature itself. The world didn't know then that this expedition would not be remembered for conquest of land, but conquest of spirit. The ship that carried them south was an aging but sturdy wooden vessel, later made legendary by its ordeal. It was named Endurance, a fitting name, as fate would soon test how literally that word could redefine human limits. Their objective was bold, curiosity shocking even today. After landing in Antarctica, Shackleton and a landing party would disembark, form teams, and make the first ever land crossing of the continent from the Weddell Sea to the Ross Sea. But by January 1915, instead of footsteps marking glory on Antarctic ground, the Endurance was frozen, stuck in dense sea ice in the Weddell Sea, one of Antarctica's most merciless gates. For 10 months, the ship drifted helplessly with the ice floes. No motors, no escape route, just the groaning sound of ice massing against timber, tightening its grip week by week. The crew made jokes at first, believing the freeze might be temporary, but by November 1915, their floating home began to creak like a cracking thought, splintering under unimaginable pressure. The ice did not negotiate. It crushed. The Endurance finally sank into the frigid waters, swallowed whole by the frozen deep, leaving Shackleton's crew stranded on drifting ice in the most isolated environment on Earth. Now imagine this. No shelter, no civilization, no rescue ships anywhere near, not even in radio reach. Just men, dogs, lifeboats, tents, and the silence of a continent that makes the wilderness on all other continents look like a suburb. The crew salvaged what they could. Photographs that mattered spiritually, essential gear, and the lifeboats. Shackleton had planned for adventure, but now he had to plan for survival psychology. Micro decisions that maintain viewer attention, but in their case, maintained life. The men set up Ocean Camp, a temporary settlement on moving ice floes. Here they hunted seals and penguins, not for sport or cruelty, but for protein, oil, fat, and warmth. The world might expect men to panic when facing isolation, but these men surprised themselves. They followed Shackleton's calm, curiosity-commanding leadership. He didn't yell or threaten. He managed morale, assigning duties, sharing responsibility, and preventing emotional collapse from turning into chaos. The crew had every reason to break, but they followed Endurance like their ship's name commanded, even while the ship itself had failed. By April 1916, the crew launched their lifeboats from the drifting ice in a desperate but calculated attempt to reach land. Their target was Elephant Island, a lonely, mountainous outpost beyond the Antarctic Peninsula. After days of rowing through freezing waters, they finally reached it, exhausted, starving, battered, but alive. But this was only one domino of the larger story. Elephant Island provided land but no rescue infrastructure, no food surplus, no signal station. It was like escaping one cage and entering another. So Shackleton prepared for the most dangerous gamble yet. He selected 5 crew members to accompany him for a rescue journey. One of them was the experienced sailor, Frank Worsley. The lifeboat they would trust for open ocean travel was James Caird, a small modified vessel built for coastal emergencies. Not 1,300+ kilometer ocean crossings in hurricane sea conditions. But history and the laws of nature don't always ask permission. Some men carve permission out of consequence. They rowed toward South Georgia Island, a place even more remote, its shores lined with jagged rock, massive ocean swells, and unpredictable storms. For 17 consecutive days, Shackleton's crew battled monstrous waves, frostbite-ready cold, and death-coming winds. They navigated by stars, instinct, experience, and Shackleton's unshakable belief that survival was a shared responsibility. Unlike fictional thrillers that require embellishment to seem shocking, this footage played reality needed no exaggeration. When the boat finally landed on South Georgia Island, the crew wasn't greeted by triumph or media or applause. but by an icy beach and towering terrain that blocked the whaling station they needed. The men hiked across mountains to reach salvation. Shackleton pushed his body beyond physical breaking, but did it with a natural spoken documentary storytelling cadence that inspires retention, not horror. Finally, they reached Stromness whaling station in South Georgia, where the crew begged local rescuers to help locate the stranded expedition party. Rescue missions had originally failed 3 times due to weather, but by August 30th, 1916, the entire crew was retrieved from Elephant Island, a success that carried no casualties, no deaths, no loss of life. It was salvation psychology in its purest form. The world saw that day what a fatherly passion for responsibility, a stubborn love for leadership, and teamwork inside silence can accomplish. He was the man who promised his crew a safe return, even when the world had written them off. That was the real essence of Ernest Shackleton, the leader of the Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition. When the world imagined heroic exploration, it pictured flags planted on untouched land. But Shackleton's greatest flag was planted not on snow, but on human psychology, on resilience, leadership, responsibility, and teamwork under conditions where even crying wouldn't help, screaming wouldn't save, and only clarity and morale could preserve human sanity. They set sail in August 1914 aboard the ship Endurance, accompanied by 27 carefully chosen crew members. This wasn't a half-baked plan or impulsive voyage. Shackleton had mapped out an ambitious crossing of Antarctica by foot, from the Weddell Sea to the Ross Sea, marking the first ever attempt to traverse the continent, coast to coast. But by January 1915, Endurance was trapped in sea ice of the Weddell Sea. What was intended as a journey of exploration became a long-term, isolated drift. The crew survived harshness, not graphic horror. They lived in tents on drifting ice for months. Shackleton understood that keeping the crew's emotional state stable was critical to survival. He assigned rotation duties. He initiated morale-boosting games for the men, and even for the sled dogs, knowing boredom can turn hope into rebellion. Each day began not as hero footage, but survival footage. They hunted seals and penguins not cruelly but respectfully, as their only source of food, oil, and protein. When the ship sank in November 1915, it wasn't drama, it was devastation. But devastation without leadership turns emotional, gripping curiosity into panic. Shackleton held the narrative tight. The crew launched their lifeboats in April 1916, eventually reaching Elephant Island, one of the most desolate islands near Antarctica. But landfall was not rescue. It was another waiting room of fate. The island had no civilization, no port, no infrastructure. So Shackleton selected 5 men, including Frank Worsley, to take the lifeboat James Caird, a 22-foot vessel, across an ocean stretch of 1,300+ kilometers to South Georgia Island. They navigated by stars, instinct, experience, and a moral hope that no algorithm could recommend. This hope was forged by necessity. After 17 terrifying days in brutal sea conditions, James Caird landed on South Georgia Island, not near the whaling station they needed. The terrain was jagged rock and unforgiving mountains, but help was not waiting. So Shackleton hiked across the mountains to Stromness whaling station. His body pushed to life support potential, but he refused to object trial. The trial was nature, and he represented his crew, not himself. After organizing rescue missions that failed multiple times due to weather brutality, the world might think someone would vanish forever. But by August 30th, 1916, every stranded crew member on Elephant Island was rescued alive with no casualties. The crossing had failed, but survival had succeeded 100%. This story is not mystery solved versus unsolved. This is a mystery solved by human will, marking one of the greatest survival and leadership stories in history. Shackleton's legacy tells your audience: justice, morality, adventure, psychology, and consequences collide not only in courtroom, but also in the coldest, isolated court nature has ever summoned,